No, American. We have been at a colony in so many years. We are not ready to be a colonized again.
Last year it was just something we take it. Greenland is not for sale, it's just a joke. But now we're nervous about what if they come and World War begins again.
That's some Greenlanders there reacting to Donald Trump's increasing rhetoric that the U.S. needs to acquire the Arctic island for security purposes. Trump has repeatedly floated the idea, in fact, since his first term, originally considered to be humorous musings. But the U.S.'s recent actions in Venezuela have led some now to take his claims far more seriously. Anders Vistisen is a Danish politician and member of the European Parliament, and he joins me now. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for making the time. Obviously, the U.S. president earlier in last week said that the U.S. needs Greenland for strategic purposes. Of course, there is already a military base there, an American military base in Greenland. What do you think is going on here? What do you think the president is actually trying to do?
There's no rationale behind the arguments coming from the president and his administration. Actually, the U.S. have gone from having 15,000 troops stationed in Greenland, more than 30 different bases and installations, down to one with 150 soldiers. So it is an American decision to pull away military from Greenland. The same comes when there's talks about mining rights. They can have all the mining deals with the Greenlandic government they want, but so far it has not been a viable economical option to mine Greenland for any company who have excavated. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, the other argument that's been used is that it should be vessels from China and Russia around Greenlandic waters. And I think if you're Canadian, you know that you don't have a lot of Russian ships coming up and down the coast between Canada and Greenland. So basically, the arguments that are used are all on a factually wrong basis. Mm-hmm. So it seems more or less to be an ego trip coming from the president, that he just wants to be the first president in 100 years to enlarge American territory.
This week, leaders from France, Britain, Germany, Italy, and on, including, of course, your country, all members of NATO released that joint statement affirming Greenland's autonomy. Are you concerned about what this could mean for NATO as a member of the EU who represents Denmark? What are your concerns around that part of it?
I think it has to go in two brackets. One is to say, do I think that America will invade Greenland military? No, I don't think that's a realistic scenario. Okay. But it is already damaging NATO, all of this rhetoric coming out. The only one who is winning by these statements from the American administration is China, Russia, other adversaries of NATO. We're talking about one founding member of NATO threatened to invade another founding member of NATO off the coast of a third founding member of NATO, Canada. So basically, of course, this is damaging to the credibility of the defensive alliance that kept us safe during the Cold War. And it's very, very sad to see that alliance that I think is very, very important and that transatlantic bond is going to be put into doubt, and the reliability of our defense structure is damaged by this, no doubt about it.
The Denmark pledged to invest $4 billion in Greenland late last year, including boats, drones, aircraft, and that kind of thing. Is that moving ahead? Because the president points to that, or his administration points to that, as a sign that Denmark hasn't done enough to defend Greenland.
First of all, I think the history here is quite important. American administrations have wanted historically the Arctic region to be demilitarized. They have said that we don't want to have a military arms race in the Arctic. Right. And that is something that has been agreed between NATO allies up there. We have had, my brother served in the Arctic Navy. He was there for 10 years. So, of course, we have other military presence in Greenland. But it has both been a Danish and an American decision to have less military there. As I said before, America have gone from having 15,000 troops during the Cold War in Greenland to now 150 soldiers. So, of course, we can ramp up and we can talk in a NATO framework about what kind of military structures we want to have in the Arctic region. I think that's a conversation we should have with Canada, with Iceland, with Norway, with Sweden and Finland, and with US regarding Alaska. But it is not a good argument to say that you want to conquer Danish territory.
The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is planning to speak with leaders from Denmark next week. What do you think will actually come of those talks? Will it be, as you say, more of a negotiation about how those activities, those military activities and personnel and resources might get built up in Greenland? Or do you think it's legitimately going to be about the acquisition of Greenland?
I think Denmark has to have a very clear signal. We are not going to negotiate looking down the barrel of a gun. So if US continue to have these threats of military occupation on the table, I don't think we have much to talk about. If we are going back to talk like allied countries in NATO about how we are going to defend the Arctic region together, all of the Arctic members of NATO, that's a different talk, and we can have that conversation. Our investments are going ahead. From a Danish side, we are going to ramp up defense spending in the Arctic region quite significantly, and we're looking forward to do that with military allies, but we are not going to talk with the US, or we should not talk with the US if they don't take back this threat of military intervention.
Do you, given what happened in Venezuela, and obviously the situations are very different, but there are some people that criticize the way the Trump administration flouted rules-based order, international law. Does that give you pause that when you say Denmark has to say we're not doing this, that perhaps the Trump administration won't care, frankly?
I think it's, for us in Denmark, a dangerous thing to start comparing Venezuela with Greenland, because it is an allied country, it's a NATO territory and so on. But I think we should take a lesson from Canada, and we should have stood more firmly from the Danish government side against the American posture here. I think that could have been beneficial. I also think that Greenlandic politicians from the independence movement should think about a little bit more carefully what signals they're sending to the US. Let's be honest, if you look at some of the overseas territory that America are in control of and how they are treated by the central administration in Washington, I don't really think that is something to be attracted to be honest. We can look at the former Danish West Indies, the so-called US Virgin Islands. They have been American for 100 years. They can still not vote for presidential elections. They don't get aid anywhere near the economical aid, anywhere near the levels Denmark is providing within the kingdom framework we are having with Greenland and the Faroe Islands. So I really think there's not much to be admired in the way the US have treated overseas territories that they're in control of.
Anders Vistisen, a Danish politician and member of the EU Parliament. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it, sir.
Well, thank you for having me on.
The U.S. president's repeated threats toward Greenland have drawn a strong response from his European and NATO counterparts.
The messages that we hear regarding Greenland are extremely concerning.
In a statement released earlier this week, the leaders of Denmark, France, and other European allies reaffirmed their commitment to Greenland and its role as part of the North American Atlantic Treaty, NATO, saying that defense of the Arctic must be achieved in conjunction with the U.S. and its allies. Kurt Volker is a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, and he joins me this morning from Washington. Ambassador, nice to see you again.
Good morning, Rosemary.
I guess I want to start with asking how serious you think the president is in the idea of owning or taking over Greenland.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think he's serious. And it is really hard to explain or hard to figure out, but he keeps talking about it. He keeps stressing ownership. In an interview that he gave with the New York Times last week, he was just incredibly honest in saying the whole reason to own it is psychological. That you don't invest in something that you lease, you invest in something that you own. And so he really is making that point. I hope that wiser heads prevail, because if the issue is security in the North, there is plenty that the U.S. could have and should have done over the past decades by its own choices. Nothing that Denmark blocked, nothing that Greenland blocked. Only past U.S. administrations didn't take it seriously enough. And he can change that under the existing rules and treaties. We have almost unlimited rights to put military capabilities into Greenland.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next, is what do you think would be the sort of solution to dealing with some of the things that he has raised, given that, as you said, that there is capacity in Greenland for increased military presence?
Sure. No, the solution is to actually be serious about the security issues. So develop a plan, figure out, okay, what are the Chinese doing that we're worried about? What are the Russians doing that we're worried about? What are the space issues that we're worried about? Develop a plan for what needs to be done to assure security, not only for Greenland, but for all of North America and for the United States. What do we need? Go to Congress. Get resources for that plan. Go to Denmark, ask for host nation support, saying we need this, this, and this from you. Put it together and do it. There's no obstacle to any of this, and this talk of ownership is simply a distraction.
Well, beyond even ownership, too, they also won't rule out taking it by military force. I mean, let's hope that's unlikely. But if that were to happen, what would that mean for NATO then, Ambassador Volker?
It would be the end of NATO. I don't think we can mince any words here. The whole point of NATO is to protect countries' territory and sovereignty. Everybody in NATO bands together to say that any attack, any threat on one is met by the full force of all of them. If it turns out that one member of NATO, particularly the biggest one, the most powerful one, starts taking land from other NATO allies, no one's going to be in it anymore. They're going to say this is not what NATO is about.
It is curious to me that he's even, or the White House is even contemplating that, given that on the other side of things, they're trying to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, another part of the world that you know well and have spent a lot of time in. What kind of message does that send to Putin? And how does that complicate efforts to bring about some sort of ceasefire and peace in Ukraine?
Right. So here, I think we have to be clear. Putin didn't invade Ukraine because the U.S. has a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. He invaded Ukraine for his own reasons. He wants to take over Ukraine, make it part of a wider Russian empire, eliminate Ukraine's national identity, its sovereignty, territory, etc. Putin did that on his own. He didn't need a Trump explanation in order to do it.
Quite right.
However, now that President Trump is making this case about a Western sphere of influence, President Putin will use that opportunistically to push back on President Trump and saying, you can do it, I can do it, and to argue for the most expansive terms possible in any settlement with Ukraine. And if I can just add, Rosemary, I don't believe Putin will ever agree to any settlement in Ukraine. He wants to defeat Ukraine, and he believes he can outlast Ukraine in the West. And that's where I really hope that we prove him wrong.
Do you think that the conversations happening amongst NATO nations around Greenland because of President Trump, do you think that Putin is also watching that closely for signs of sort of fractures in the alliance?
Yes, of course. It's one of his principal objectives, to create fissures within the alliance, fissures within the European Union, between the United States and Europe. And so he is doing everything he can to augment that, to accelerate those differences. So he will be enjoying this.
Would you say that this is between what happened in Venezuela, again, different circumstances, but now, of course, the president says that the United States is going to run Venezuela to some extent. This talk about Greenland, is this U.S. imperialism? Is this, to your point, under what he has said he will do under this new national security strategy? How should we understand what is actually happening here?
That's a great question, Rosemary, because I think there's something else going on here. President Trump doesn't like criticism. He likes successes. And the U.S. military is the most capable, most effective fighting force in the world. And I think President Trump has seen the military deliver some short-term successes. The bombing run in Iran, Maduro. And I think he is getting addicted to this idea that he can just snap his fingers and the U.S. military goes out and does something. And so he's put other countries on notice, Colombia, Mexico, Cuba. He has threatened Greenland. He just this past day or two, he attacked ISIS in Syria. He's threatened Iran again. Yeah. So I think that this is a bigger pattern of President Trump, in contrast to his first term and his campaign rhetoric going into his second term, where he was warning about the U.S. getting involved in all these wars. I think he's now become a little bit addicted to the idea that he can just do something and get away with it.
What, and again, not to suggest that these cases are in any way similar, but what does Canada take from that then? And you know, how forceful should Canada's response be in the face of some of these threats and actions?
Yeah. So my advice for Canada or for any of our allies has always been the same. Don't wait and complain. Be proactive. Figure out what are the issues that are real. I mean, the psychological issue of owning Greenland is not real, but the security issues around Greenland and the Arctic, they are real. Right. So figure out what the real issues are, come up with proposals for addressing them, engage President Trump, engage the U.S. administration on how to do those things. So be extremely proactive in dealing with these things. If you wait for what President Trump will do on his own, more often than not, our European allies and Canada are not going to like it.
Ambassador Kurt Volker, always good to talk to you, especially in these times. Thank you for making the time for us.
My pleasure. Thank you.